Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. As I'm recording this video, it's about 10.5 hours until the Endless Delve event. Endless Delve is an event GGG have run once before, where all you can do is delve. You have unlimited sulfite, and you can't leave the delve mines. This means that you can't go to your hideout, you can't trade with other players or go to their mines or anything like that. It's forced to be solo self-found, and additionally, because you don't have access to your hideout, you have no access to the crafting bench. This makes the Endless Delve event a very, 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 very limiting thing in terms of character builds, because the gear that you've got access to is so much worse than normal. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you can't play a lot of builds. It means that their performance is going to be lower, but also in a lot of ways, the requirements for performance are lower as well. You're not encountering constant conquerors that have sort of 35 million hit points to 55 million. You're not encountering Cirrus with 80 odd million hit points. The only bosses that you'll encounter will be the 3 delve bosses. And whilst those can be very tanky, you're not going to be spending much of your time fighting them. And what this means is that it's more about projecting damage to multiple targets and surviving hits from multiple targets when enemies fire back on you than it is about being able to deal a lot of damage to a single target or survive single massive smashes from an enemy. So that changes a lot of the calculus that goes into designing a build. That said, whilst I designed this with the Endless Delve event in mind, I don't see any reason that the build that I'm suggesting here wouldn't work in the normal game. Just that there'll be a couple of items that I've left out of this because they're really easy to get your hands on in a trade league, but you just can't count on having them in a solo self-found environment. And so that includes a number of boss uniques, for instance, things that you just cannot get at all in the Endless Delve event. So let's go through what we're going to be doing. Firstly, let's talk the skills. Firstly, we're going to have a primary 6-link. Okay, so let's have a quick recap of the mechanics of the skill Bane. Bane does 2 fundamental things, damage and utility. It combines both into one convenient package, and that's its main appeal as a skill. Bane targets a fairly large area on the ground, and all enemies that are in the area of Bane when you cast it will have 2 things happen to them. Firstly, they will start suffering chaos damage over time. At gem level 20, this is 1130.6 of base chaos damage per second, and that scales up both with your character's stats for scaling damage over time, as well as your character's stats for chaos damage. But also, really importantly, it scales up with modifiers to spell damage, and that allows a number of support gems that otherwise wouldn't work to actually work on Bane. And that's the reason we're using Controlled Destruction, because Controlled Destruction is a 39% more spell damage multiplier, and that works on Bane. Additionally, Bane also applies all hexes that are linked to it. So hexes are a subset of curses, and they are the majority of curses. Hexes are basically all of those curses that aren't marks. And so Bane will apply all of the linked hexes. Additionally, Bane has synergy with all of these hexes. Each of these hexes at gem level 20 will add 43% more damage to Bane. And now this stacks additively. So if you've got 2 curses, that's 86% more damage. If you've got 3, it's 129% more damage. So you can see here that going from 186% base damage to 229% base damage is not worth a full support gem. You are sacrificing some damage by putting that 3rd curse in instead of putting in a support gem that might be a 39% more multiplier, but it's still pretty good given that you are getting utility as well. Additionally, you get 50% increased damage over time duration per curse that is applied, and that's really useful as well. So we are going to be linking Bane to Despair, Void Manipulation, Temporal Chains, Punishment, and Controlled Destruction at endgame. However, you're certainly not going to start at endgame. And earlier on, Punishment is the worst of the curses. So Punishment goes away when you're working on a 5-link, and you'll be using Bane, Despair, Void Manip, Temporal Chains, and Controlled Destruction. When you can't use a 5-link yet, so when you're going through the, not the axe in the Endless Delve event, but when you're sort of leveling through the sorts of character levels that would be the axe, or even when you've gotten to map equivalent level and you still haven't got a 5-link, at that point you can remove anything you want. Just make sure that you keep Bane and Despair. Those are the heart of the build. Those are essential. Despair is so much damage. If we turn it off, you'll see that it more than halves the damage. Whereas removing, say, Temporal Chains kind of hurts on the damage front, as does removing Punishment, as does removing Controlled Destruction, but none of these rip the heart out of the build the way that removing Despair does. The next thing that you're doing, though, because Bane doesn't do tremendous damage, occasionally you're going to come up against something tankier. When you do, we're going to be using an Essence Drain setup. Now I've got this set up in gloves and it's only a 4-link. It's not optimized for damage. It's optimized to be a hybrid of damage and utility because we are using Arcane Surge in here. But this should do moderate damage as well, and it's something that just stacks with Bane. So if you come across a tanky rare, say you've got a 3 million hit point rare while you're clearing, hit it with Bane first, inflict all your curses, then throw Essence Drain on it. If that's not enough, you can also drop in Wither Totems. Wither linked to Spell Totem, linked to Multi-Totems, are linked to faster casting, will inflict stacks of Wither on the enemy pretty quickly, and each stack of Wither up to a maximum of 15 inflicts 6% increased chaos damage taken. However, we're going to scale it a little bit on the passive tree as well, and so Wither is going to be a significant damage multiplier. In fact, let's just quickly bring up the configuration setting here and change our Withered stacks to 15, and you'll see the damage over time DPS goes from 270,000 to 521,000 there. So that is the offensive setup. Defensively, we are using Molten Shell linked to cast when damage taken. Aura-wise, for the moment, I'm going to recommend Determination, Malevolence, Defiance Banner, and Temper Shield, with Grace as something that I'm keeping in mind as a backup. If Malevolence underperforms, then it's getting the boot and Grace is coming in instead, especially if I'm willing to sacrifice some damage capability in order to be more durable. In terms of the itemization that we're using, everything has to be crafted yourself, or in the case of uniques, needs to be things you're very confident you'll find. I am going to basically assume that you've got access to pretty much nothing. So everything has to be realistically craftable. Here is an example of a wand that you can craft on average with 12 attempts using a Shuddering Fossil, using a Shuddering Fossil, a Corroded Fossil, and a Fossil from memory. I've got all those details in the notes on the build as to exactly how you'd go about using that. Additionally, when you fail this craft, you will usually get a +1 wand, or at least you'll often get a +1 wand, which is going to be good enough to use in the interim. The reason that we're using a plus to spell gems level wand is twofold. Firstly, +1 to the level of all chaos spell skill gems is one of the best scalers for damage on Bane. Secondly, +1 to the level of all spell skill gems also scales our determination, and if we're using it, our grace, which we're then going to be scaling further through a lot of aura effect on the passive tree, and that's going to provide considerable defense. Here I've got a defensive shield. I do have a number of other options you could consider. You could use a second copy of the same wand, which will tremendously increase the damage, but of course at the cost of having no defenses. You could go with an offensive shield, which is going to be +1 to the level of all chaos spell skill gems with some chaos resistance on it. This is sort of semi-hard to craft. You just throw a bunch of aberrant fossils onto a shield. Eventually it'll stick, but it's going to take a little while. It needs to be a pure intelligence shield. So it needs to have a dexterity requirement and a strength requirement that are both 0. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do that. Or you could use this more defensively oriented shield, which is really bad as well. Lots of options there, and I'm going to leave that choice up to you. I just got a resistance shield in there because I think resists are going to be a bit tough. Every slot that I've left blank, you just want life resist gear in, and as much as you can realistically get. Amulet's probably going to need to be used to fix up stats, and I don't think that this amulet's unreasonable. And these cerulean rings here are sort of okay without being great. They're cerulean rings just because that's just something that I thought is not a particularly strong one. You could use this as a different ring base entirely, and it would be stronger. So don't worry about the base. Amethyst ring may actually be the best because we do want chaos resistance somewhere. And whilst I've put a bunch on the ring suffixes, you may not be able to get that. Belt again is going to be life resist. If you get a good unique though in any of these slots, use it. Elphus Howl being one of the very best of them that you're likely to see. Flasks wise, we want a granite flask and a jade flask if you're using both determination and grace. If you are not using both of them, then I would suggest that you use determination only, and in that case you still want the granite flask. In that case, the granite flask should have an armor enhancing suffix. At the moment I've got a evasion enhancing suffix on the granite flask and a armor enhancing suffix on the jade flask, so you'd want to swap those around and then only use one of them, and then you'd have a free slot. Maybe you'd use a sulfur flask at that point that has some sort of utility on it, like anti-burning, or even anti-freeze is an option. Then we have Seething Divine Life, Flask of Sealing. You definitely want something that's instant and that will provide instant healing and will remove bleeds. Even in softcore, that's really important because there's just enough bleed in the Delve Mines that it will get you at some point. We're going to unfortunately need to use a Mana Flask, and I've got to play the build to experiment to find out what type of Mana Flask mods I want. I don't yet know. Finally, you want some sort of Zoom Zoom Flask. So in terms of the passive tree, let's have a look at the overall texture first, starting with the Occultist Ascendancy. So I feel that 6 points in this are essential. Void Beacon and Withering Presence are amazing. Malediction is amazing and is basically essential when it comes to Bane. Otherwise, there's Profane Bloom, I think, is the best choice of the rest, but it is not essential, and I will leave that choice up to you. If you think that it's better to go with Vile Bastion or Forbidden Power instead, then there's certainly an argument that can be made for either of those, though you would probably want to reroute a couple of sections of the passive tree if you do change that. But Profane Bloom is just fun. Like, there's just something fantastic about hearing that popping noise. Enemies exploding like popcorn behind you is just satisfying. In terms of the key things on the passive tree that might seem a little bit strange. So we're focusing on damage over time multiplier, picking up Growth and Decay, picking up Acrimony, and wherever that's available, we're grabbing it. There's a couple of other spots as well. Atrophy, I think, from memory is... Oh, that's just Chaos damage. We're getting a bit of Chaos damage here. We're picking up a number of life clusters. We've got the Purity of Flesh cluster, which is sort of okay. We path through Cruel Preparation, which is great. We take the Melding cluster, which was buffed recently and is quite a bit better than it used to be, although it's still not spectacular. So you get 3, 3, 3, and 7% now, which is 16% overall. It also gives you some Energy Shield, which is a bonus. We're not really able to scale up very much. Then we're taking the Blood Drinker section as well, because they're some of the most efficient points on the tree, even though we have to have a dead point or two to get to them. In terms of other things that we're taking, though, the thing that might surprise people is the number of reservation clusters we're taking. So we are taking the Influence cluster, we are taking the Charisma cluster, and we are taking the entirety of the Sovereignty cluster. That is because auras are incredibly strong defensively at the moment. And I feel like it is just far better to take, say, the Serenity cluster and invest more into defense through auras than it would be to instead spend those points on some other form of defense on the character. Lastly, we are taking just a few good Chaos clusters around the place, and we are taking the Asylum cluster. Asylum we are taking because Chaos damage is Chaos resistance is able to be an offensive stat because of Chaos Mastery. Masteries wise, we're taking 50 life, we're taking 10% increased maximum life, we are taking the 20% increased effective withered. The Curse Mastery thing, I've left a few notes on that. That is something that is up to you. There's a number of good choices for it. We're taking 17 to Chaos Resistance here. Here we're taking 12 to All Ally Res and 7% Chaos Res. This is one you wouldn't normally take, but we're taking it because of the nature of this event. In this event, resistances are going to be very hard to get your hands on, and so you're going to want to get those. Reservation clusters, 15% efficiency, and there is also 15% aura effect on you. And that's basically the entirety of the passive tree. Of course, the Path of Building will be available. I have a whole bunch of notes as well. I'll just quickly go through some of the big things. So these are notes that you can have a look at. They should be in the Path of Building. Aura-wise, there's a little bit of discussion of your options here, and that you might want to consider things like Tempest Shield, Defiance Banner, Grace, Determination, Malevolence. You might want to use Purity of Elements at some point. Maybe you want to stick with Purity of Elements for a long time. Just sort of play around with that. And your items with mana reservation efficiency will be very hard to get in this event. So Alpha's Howl is a possibility. A Redeemer Influenced Amulet is a possibility. There's a couple of others as well. But these are going to be very, very, very unlikely to drop. If you get one, fantastic. Change the build around it to fit it in. If you don't get one, then don't worry about it. For incoming hit mitigation, so we have a moderate investment into both armor and evasion here, assuming that you decide to go with Grace. Again, if you don't decide to go with Grace, then we have a moderate investment just into armor. And you can go heavy block if you want, although this will require quite a bit of a rework to the tree. This will probably require you to use the Broken Shield Remnant of Empires, that is an event-only item. Every time that you create a character, you can get a new copy of this. This means that you can fish for the perfect Vile implicit on it, just by saving up a bunch of Vile Orbs and making new characters. And if you go this way, you're probably going to want to take Mystic Bulwark, and I think it's called Safeguard. There's a couple of clusters on the passive tree for Spell Block. They can fill you out on Spell Block. You can get to cap Spell Block easily with the Remnant of Empires, but you'll have a lot more of a hard time capping your attack block defenses. So I'll leave that up to you. Depends upon how it feels, how defensive you want to be, and also how comfortable you are manually dodging out of enemy attacks. Another option, and this would change the build quite a lot, when near Pain Attunement, so we could go Petrified Blood and Low Life. This would require us to take all of the nodes north of the tree that are Recoup themed, so this is the Infused Flesh cluster, and I just want to leave that in mind as an option that you can consider if you're an advanced player and you're willing to do spec into that. I do think it might be the strongest at extreme late game, but I'm not sure I'm going to get to extreme late game in this. Next, very important, you want to use a level 1 cast when damage taken and a level 9 Molten Shell. Don't level past these points, and if you do level past them, you're probably just going to want to start over with new gems. The reason for this is that low level cast when damage taken procs more frequently, and level 1 cast when damage taken is capped at proccing gems that are required level. I think it's 37 and down, and that means level 9 Molten Shell. Of course, if you really want to use a high level cast when damage taken, then you be you. Don't let me tell you you're wrong. I just think you're wrong. I'll just think you're wrong. Curses. Despair is the best option offensively. Temporal Chain's the best defensively. Enfeeble is the second best defensively, so if you want more defense, you can go with that. Punishment is the second best offensively, and I think that I would go with Despair, Temporal Chains, and Punishment as your 3 curses. However, definitely feel free to experiment with other options here. You can definitely use 2 curses and a 3rd damage support like Efficacy, and if you do this, then you want to drop the Whispers of Doom cluster. On a 5 link, you definitely want to use 2 curses and 2 damage supports. And on a 4 link, you want to use 2 curses and 1 damage support. And all of this is sort of different to what was accepted best practice prior to 3.15. That's just because of some of the changes in scaling of support gems that happened in 3.15, ended up making it so that Bane became better with additional curses. Like you started wanting to use more curses on Bane than you did previously. So let's talk crafting those wands that we're talking about here. So in the items section, you'll see that I have this +2 wand bad. It's an opal wand, and the key to crafting these is that they need to be item level 82 or lower. This is essential because there is a mod at item level 83 that will wreck your day because it will always show up. It's so common, and it's something you don't want to see. So you want to be item level 82 or lower to ban the malicious prefix from rolling. You want to use Shuddering, Corroded, and Metallic fossils, and these will collectively ban all of the other prefixes except for 3. Spell damage percent, +1 all spell skills, and +1 chaos spell skill gems. Then the game will make a roll. There's a 1 in 12 chance that you will be given a 6 mod item when you use a fossil or a chaos orb or something like that to craft an item. There is a 3 in 12 chance that you will get a 5 mod item and an 8 in 12 chance that you'll get a 4 mod item. Well, every time that you roll that 1 in 12, you are going to get a 3 prefix item. And those 3 prefixes will be spell damage percent, +1 all spells, and +1 chaos spell skill gems. So that's how you can get your wands like the one that you saw. However, the times that you miss and you get a 5 mod item, you will get one of these 2. One of +1 all spell skill gems and +1 chaos spell skill gems. And that wand is still usable in the interim. It's not what you want, but just use it until you get better. Lastly, use an opal wand. Opal wands give the most spell damage of any base. So, shields. Shields, I have suggested a few things you can do here. I've got an Archon Kite shield currently in the build just because it solves problems through having 12% all resistances. But you can go a Pinnacle Tower shield that has a good balance of armor and block. You can go a Vile Buckler for the best block chance in the game. You can go any of the top dexterity/strength shields, so that's a Spiny, Cardinal, or Elegant round shield. All of those are good options. Or you can go a pure intelligence shield, so Titanium Spirit shield, and you can spam it with Aberrant Fossils. These will then have a 1 in 16 chance to roll +1 to the level of all Chaos Spell Skill Gems, which is something that is a powerful boost to your character. Alternately, if you prefer to roll to have more of a bias towards getting life rolls, you can use Pristine and Aberrant Fossils together, and this will take the chance down from 1 in 16 to 1 in 20, but the times that you do hit, it'll be better. Note that you cannot get +1 to the level of all Chaos Spell Skill Gems on any shield unless it is pure intelligence. So if it has any evasion rating or any armor on it, then it is not able to roll that mod. There's also an extreme upgrade path, and that is to get really lucky on with an item level 82 staff. Those are 1 in 40 to hit, +3 to all Chaos spell skill gems, and +2 to all spell skill gems. This, however, is a 4-socket craft, Etheric Corroded Metallic Shuddering. You probably won't hit this, but trying for it is the single best use you'll have for your 4-socket resonators. And so if you do hit this while you're recording your gameplay, please squawk like a chicken and email the video to me. Next, I want to talk about chess pieces. Tabular versus crafted 5-link versus other options. 6 links will be rare and don't count on ever getting one. So you want to have a plan for functioning on a 5-link. If you go for a 5-link, 6-socket it first before trying to 5-link it. One time in 14, you will, at least according to some of the simulations I've seen, you will accidentally hit a 6-link first before you hit a 5-link. And if that happens, fantastic. Tabula Rasa and a 5-link Carcass Jack are amongst the best options, but they're somewhat rare, especially early on. Tabula can be farmed somewhat in very low tier content, as Fractured Walls drop a lot of uniques, and so if you break them down in sort of monster level 10 and lower areas, there's a good chance of getting a Tabula there. That's because there's just not many uniques to choose from. However, this process is not overly fast, and I'll leave it up to you. Some players reported this took them an hour, some players reported it took them 5 minutes, others reported that they didn't get a Tabula after 2.5 hours of trying. Additionally, you can just throw Varlorbs onto random chess pieces. This is believed to have a 1 in 45 chance to hit a 5 or better link, with 1 in 114 to hit 6-socket 6-link, 1 in 114 to hit 6-socket 5-link, and 1 in 120 to hit 5-socket 5-link, if the way that Varlorbs are speculated by the community to work is correct. So I'll leave that option up to you as well. I do think this is one of the better uses for Varlorbs in this league. So, if you're interested in downloading this Path of Building, I will put a link to it in the description of the video below. Otherwise, may your Varlorbs have interesting results. I'm actually going to be starting this event a little bit late. Even though it is starting at a perfect time for me in Australia, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to play for about 12 hours or so because I've got other commitments. After that, however, I will be streaming some of my gameplay over on my Twitch account, and I will also try to put out some sort of update on how this build is performing. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you in the Delve Mines. One very last announcement, though, before I do wind this up, and that is that I'll put a link in the description below to the Nexus store that I run. Nexus is in a lot of ways a competitor to Steam, so they sell games. They've also started getting into the microtransaction market, and they have a deal with GGG where they've got an exclusive supporter pack, the Cursed supporter pack, and so there'll be some information on my Nexus about that. But it's $60 US. It comes with an in-game armor set and a monkey pet that are a pirate-themed armor set, and also 200 store points. So if you feel like that's interesting and you're interested in buying it, then I will get a cut. Otherwise, if you're not interested, that's fine too.